Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered. Through times of change,
my husband, he does it really. He can do all of it.
Something significant has shifted inside Buckingham Palace, and almost nobody saw it coming. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has quietly been given a role so carefully guarded that even Camilla was kept completely in the dark. And the more the details emerge, the more it becomes clear that the monarchy may never look quite the same again. The quiet shift nobody saw coming. For most of 2024, the world watched with genuine concern as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped back from public life following her cancer diagnosis. The outpouring of support was remarkable, and unlike almost anything the monarchy had witnessed in recent memory, millions of people across the globe sent messages, held their breath through each carefully worded palace statement, lit candles, and quietly hoped for her recovery. What followed over the next several months was a story of extraordinary personal resilience that captured the attention of people far beyond the usual audience for royal news. By the summer of 2024, Catherine had begun making cautious but meaningful returns to public duties, each appearance more confident and more assured than the last. By the time 2025 arrived, she was no longer simply recovering. She was rebuilding, and doing so with a sense of purpose and quiet determination that caught even the most seasoned royal observers completely off guard. But something else was happening beneath the surface of those carefully managed public appearances, something that had nothing to do with rehabilitation or gradual returns to ribbon cuttings and charitable visits. According to sources familiar with palace dynamics, a quiet but deeply significant restructuring was already underway inside the institution itself. Conversations were being had in private rooms with very few people present. Meetings were taking place without the usual courtier attendance. Documents were being prepared and reviewed outside the normal administrative channels. And at the center of it all was Catherine, not as a recovering patient carefully finding her feet again, but as a figure being actively and deliberately repositioned within the monarchy's inner architecture. To understand how remarkable this shift truly is, it helps to appreciate just how rigid and resistant to change the structure of royal life tends to be. Roles within the palace are not simply handed out based on popularity, personal chemistry, or public appeal. They are the product of years of precedent, deeply ingrained protocol, and careful institutional negotiation that takes place over long stretches of time. Every senior royal occupies a particular lane within the system, and stepping outside of that lane, even slightly, even with the best intentions, tends to generate considerable friction. The hierarchy has always been clearly defined. The monarch sits at the top. The queen consort occupies a position of formal, ceremonial, and symbolic significance directly beside him. The heir to the throne and their spouse follow, with defined but carefully bounded responsibilities that are understood by everyone within the institution. For Catherine to have been given something that exists outside of that established and long-standing framework is, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. What makes the story even more layered and more difficult to fully absorb is the timing. Catherine's illness had, in a strange and unintended way, given the palace an extended opportunity to observe what her absence truly meant for the institution. Engagements that had quietly depended on her warmth, her ability to connect instinctively with ordinary people, and her uncanny instinct for reading a room were suddenly exposed as far harder to manage without her presence. Charities she had championed struggled noticeably for media attention and public oxygen. Causes she had made genuinely her own felt the gap immediately and acutely. And within the palace itself, those who had perhaps underestimated how central she had quietly become to the monarchy's public credibility were forced into a moment of honest and uncomfortable reassessment. By early 2025, that reassessment had turned into something far more concrete and actionable. Sources suggest that King Charles, himself navigating his own health challenges with characteristic stoicism and determination, had become increasingly focused on the long-term stability of the institution he had waited his entire life to lead. And in those private conversations about stability, about continuity, through careful distance, through formal grandeur, and about the face the monarchy would need to present to the world in the decades stretching ahead, one name kept rising to the surface with consistent force. Not as a future consideration to be planned for eventually, but as a present and urgent necessity. Catherine was not simply being welcomed back into public life. She was being brought in, deliberately and with full intention, to something considerably more significant. What nobody outside a very small and carefully selected circle knew at the time was that the role being discussed for her was not a ceremonial one. It was not an honorary title or a charitable portfolio expansion designed to mark her return to health. It was something quieter, more substantive, and considerably more sensitive than anything her official position as Princess of Wales would ordinarily suggest. And in a detail that would later raise eyebrows among those who eventually learned of it, the discussions had deliberately excluded someone who might reasonably have been expected to be involved at every stage. Camilla, Queen Consort, was not part of those conversations. Whether that was a deliberate strategic decision or simply a reflection of the extraordinary trust and discretion required to build something of this nature, the effect was the same. Something significant was being constructed around Catherine, and it was being constructed without Camilla's knowledge. The role Camilla was never told about. The specifics of what Catherine has been given are, by careful and deliberate design, not meant for public consumption. That is precisely what makes the story so compelling and so genuinely difficult to dismiss as royal speculation or media invention. In royal circles, the most significant internal shifts are rarely announced with fanfare or ceremony. They do not arrive with formal press releases, official investitures, or public declarations of changed responsibilities. They happen in private conversations held in small rooms, in changed meeting structures that only insiders notice, and in the subtle but unmistakable recalibration of who is consulted, who is informed, and who is quietly told about something only after the decisions have already been made. And according to sources speaking carefully but with remarkable consistency, what Catherine has been entrusted with falls squarely and unmistakably into that category of unannounced but deeply meaningful institutional change. What is understood from those familiar with the situation is that Catherine has been given a coordinating role in how the monarchy presents itself on issues of national significance and emotional weight. This is emphatically not the same as a communications brief or a public relations function managed by palace press officers. It goes considerably deeper than that. The role involves Catherine having direct and meaningful input into decisions about which causes the royal family collectively chooses to amplify at particular moments, how the institution responds to periods of national emotional difficulty or collective grief, and how the bridge between the palace and the broader public is maintained, strengthened, and made credible in a world increasingly skeptical of inherited authority. In essence, she has been handed a form of responsibility for the monarchy's human connection to the people it ultimately exists to serve. For anyone who has followed Catherine's career as a working royal with any degree of attention, this development will not arrive as a complete surprise. Her instincts in this particular area have always been evident and consistently impressive. From her early and sustained championing of early childhood development and mental health awareness, to her visible and clearly genuine empathy during difficult national moments, she has demonstrated repeatedly and convincingly that she understands something about public feeling that is genuinely and unusually rare in royal circles. The palace has always known this at some level. What is fundamentally new is that they are now formally and deliberately building institutional structure around it. The monarch sits at the top. The queen consort occupies a position of formal, ceremonial, and symbolic significance directly beside him. But here is precisely where the story becomes genuinely sensitive, and where its implications extend well beyond Catherine herself. Camilla, as queen consort, might reasonably and with considerable justification have expected to be consulted about any significant expansion of another senior royal's remit within the institution. The queen consort is not simply a ceremonial figurehead who attends events and smiles for photographs. She plays an active and substantive role in supporting the king, in managing the social and diplomatic dimensions of palace life, and in maintaining the kind of institutional coherence and internal harmony that the monarchy depends on for its smooth daily functioning. To learn that a new role of genuine and lasting substance had been carefully carved out without her involvement, without even the basic courtesy of her awareness, is the kind of detail that lands with considerable weight in a world where perceived hierarchies and institutional respect matter enormously. Sources who are familiar with the situation and who have spoken about it with careful discretion suggest that When Camilla eventually became aware of the arrangement, her reaction was measured, controlled, and unmistakably cool. Those who know her well describe a moment of quiet but pointed recalibration on her part, a clear recognition that something meaningful had shifted in the internal geometry of the palace without her having been given any opportunity to contribute to or even witness that shift. She did not make a scene because that is emphatically not her style, and because she is far too experienced and strategically aware to respond in a way that might compromise her own position. But those who have observed her closely in the weeks and months that followed suggest that the discovery carried genuine and lasting weight for her. What makes the deliberate omission even more striking to those who study the palace's internal culture is the extraordinary care that appears to have been taken to keep knowledge of the arrangement contained within an unusually small circle. In an institution where information flows through well-established and carefully maintained channels, and where senior courtiers pride themselves on being fully informed about developments that might affect the institution they serve, the fact that something this significant remained unknown to the Queen Consort for as long as it did speaks to a level of deliberate and intentional discretion that goes well beyond ordinary administrative caution. It was not an oversight born of poor communication or institutional carelessness. It was a choice, made consciously and maintained consistently. And the question of who made that choice, under whose authority it was made, and precisely why it was deemed necessary, is one that those inside the palace are still quietly and carefully working through. A strategic alliance with the king. To fully understand how Catherine came to hold this new and significant position within the palace's internal structure, it is necessary to look carefully and honestly at the relationship that made it possible in the first place. The bond between Catherine and King Charles has not historically been the central focus of royal coverage or public fascination. Far more attention has always been paid to other family dynamics, other relationships, and other alliances within the institution. But those who observe the palace with genuine care and long experience have noted for some considerable time that the relationship between Catherine and her father-in-law is one of the most quietly consequential in the entire institution, and one that has been consistently underestimated by those who cover royal affairs from the outside. It did not begin as the warm and mutually confident bond it appears to be today. In the early years of Catherine's relationship with William, Charles was, by most credible accounts, cautiously supportive, but not demonstrably close to her in any personal sense. He recognized her qualities and her potential with the eye of a man who had spent decades studying what the monarchy needed, but the relationship had not yet developed into one of genuine mutual trust and confidence. That changed gradually, shaped by years of shared experience, shared institutional pressures, and a growing mutual recognition of what each brought to the other. And it changed most noticeably and most rapidly during periods of serious institutional stress, when difficult decisions needed to be made quickly and with limited time for consultation. It was often Catherine's counsel, quietly offered and carefully considered, that found its way meaningfully into the conversation, even in moments when it had not been formally sought or officially invited. Might reasonably and with considerable justification have expected to be consulted about. By the time Charles ascended to the throne in September 2022, following the death of Queen Elizabeth II after her remarkable 70 years of service, the dynamic between them had already evolved considerably and decisively. Catherine was no longer in any meaningful sense simply his son's wife, a pleasant presence at family gatherings, and a reliable performer at public engagements. She was a proven institutional asset, someone whose public instincts had been tested repeatedly across a wide range of circumstances, and had consistently proven not merely adequate, but genuinely exceptional. And Charles, now carrying the full and formidable weight of the monarchy on his own shoulders at an age when most men his age are contemplating retirement, was increasingly and clearly aware of the profound value of having someone of her caliber closely and reliably aligned with his vision for the institution he now led. The health challenges both of them faced during 2024 deepened the alliance between them in ways that are genuinely difficult to quantify, but remarkably easy to sense in the accounts of those who witnessed the change at close quarters. There is something about shared vulnerability and shared confrontation with mortality that strips away institutional formality and replaces it with something more honest and more direct. Sources suggest that the period during which both Charles and Catherine were navigating serious illness with considerable courage brought an entirely new and more personal dimension to their working relationship. Conversations that might previously have happened through carefully managed intermediaries began to happen directly and without the usual filters. Decisions that might previously have involved wider consultation were increasingly made in a tighter and more trusted circle, and Catherine was consistently and reliably inside that circle. What emerged from this deepening and increasingly personal alignment was a genuinely shared framework for thinking about the monarchy's future direction and its place in national life. Charles, always a man of powerful institutional instinct and strong personal conviction, had clear and long-held ideas about the direction he wanted the crown to take during his reign. He wanted it to feel more authentically human, more directly connected to the texture of ordinary daily life across the country, and more genuinely capable of speaking to people who had grown increasingly skeptical of inherited privilege and institutional authority that could not justify itself through demonstrated relevance. Catherine, almost by instinct and without apparent effort, embodied precisely those qualities and that vision. And so, the alliance became not merely personal and emotional, but profoundly strategic. She became, in a very real and practical sense, the living and visible expression of the kind of monarchy Charles had always wanted to build and had spent his life working toward. The palace insiders who noticed. First, in any large and complex institution, significant internal changes rarely remain invisible for long to those who work within them and know how to read the signals. People notice. Staff observe meaningful shifts in significant internal and in who has access to whom. Courtiers pick up on subtle changes in tone during briefings that would escape the attention of an outsider entirely. Senior advisors begin to sense clearly and early when the informal channels of influence and information have been quietly but deliberately rerouted in a new direction. And in the palace, where hierarchy governs everything and even the smallest signals carry disproportionate institutional weight, the changes surrounding Catherine's new role began to register with a select and perceptive group of insiders well before any wider awareness developed either inside or outside the institution. The first signs, according to those familiar with the palace's internal culture and working rhythms, were subtle in their individual details, but consistent and cumulative in their overall pattern. Catherine began appearing in meetings and substantive following the death of Queen Elizabeth II after her remarkable 70 years of service, conversations that would not previously have included her presence or her input, not official public engagements or carefully staged external events, but internal discussions about institutional strategy, about how the monarchy would navigate particular sensitive moments, and about which royal voices should be most prominent in specific and carefully chosen contexts. Her presence in those rooms was noted immediately by those with experience enough to understand what it signified. And the fact that her presence continued and deepened, that it was clearly not a one-off invitation, but an established and recurring pattern, told experienced palace observers everything they needed to understand about what was happening and why. Staff members who had worked within the institution for many years and across several different royal contexts remarked privately and with considerable care on the visible change in how Catherine was being treated by those who worked most closely with the king. There was a quality of deference in those interactions that went meaningfully beyond the ordinary and expected respect accorded to the Princess of Wales by virtue of her title and her position. It was the specific and unmistakable kind of deference that reflects actual and consequential proximity to real decision-making power within the institution. When Catherine expressed a view or a preference on something of institutional significance, it was not simply listened to politely and then set aside as one input among many. It shaped outcomes in concrete and traceable ways. That is a distinction that people who have spent years inside the palace understand with great clarity, even when they might struggle to articulate it precisely to those on the outside. Senior advisors also began to notice meaningful changes in the flow of information through the palace's internal channels. In institutions like the palace, information is not merely administratively useful. It is the currency of influence, and the channels through which it travels are carefully designed, closely managed, and jealously protected by those who control them. When those channels begin to shift in observable ways, when certain people start receiving substantive briefings they had not previously received as a matter of course, or when others find themselves operating with slightly less complete information than they had previously enjoyed, the implications are understood immediately and with precision by everyone involved. Several figures within the palace's established structure found themselves in exactly that unsettling position during the early months of 2025, and the common thread connecting those individual experiences was unmistakably Catherine's expanding role and deepening institutional influence. What this means for Camilla's position. There is a version of this story that presents Camilla's exclusion from knowledge of Catherine's new role as nothing more than an administrative matter of timing and appropriate discretion, rather than a deliberate and meaningful signal about shifting internal dynamics. Camilla herself, by all accounts, and by the evidence of her long and instructive experience navigating the complexities of royal life, is far too seasoned and too strategically intelligent to make the error of voicing any public reaction that might be interpreted negatively or used against her interests. She has navigated considerably more turbulent and personally threatening waters than this during her decades within the orbit of the royal family, and she understands with hard-won clarity that visible displeasure expressed within a palace context rarely leads to any useful or constructive outcome. But there is another version of this story, one that sources with genuine knowledge of the situation suggest is considerably closer to the full truth, in which the exclusion was not accidental or incidental at all, in which it was, in fact, a carefully considered and deliberately maintained signal about the direction in which the monarchy is moving under Charles's leadership, and about where the true and operational center of gravity within that institution now genuinely resides on a daily basis. Camilla's position as queen consort is constitutionally and ceremonially secure in ways that require no qualification or reassurance. She was formally crowned alongside Charles in May 2023 in a ceremony watched by millions, and nothing in Catherine's newly expanded role alters or threatens the formal architecture of royal precedence as it is publicly understood. But within the living reality of the monarchy, as within most complex human institutions, formal structure and actual influence are frequently and significantly different things. And it is precisely in the space between those two realities that the full implications of this situation become most interesting and most consequential. For years, with patience that deserves genuine acknowledgement, Camilla worked steadily and with considerable strategic skill to build her place and her credibility within an institution that had not always made that path easy or straightforward for her. Her journey was uniquely complicated by history and by public perception, in ways that few people in any walk of life have had to navigate, reflects actual and consequential proximity to real decision-making power within the institution. She entered the royal family carrying the full weight of a painful public narrative about the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. And the hostility that greeted her in those early years was real, sustained, and deeply personal. That she managed to transform her public standing as substantially and as convincingly as she eventually did is a genuine achievement that deserves honest acknowledgement regardless of one's views on the circumstances that preceded it. But Camilla's influence within the palace has always been rooted primarily and essentially in her relationship with Charles himself. It flows from her physical and emotional proximity to the king, rather than from any independent power base she has built within the institution on her own terms. And that is a fundamentally and importantly different kind of influence from what Catherine now appears to be developing with intention and institutional support. Catherine's new role is not purely relational or dependent on the warmth of a particular personal connection. It is structural. It is embedded in the institution's internal workings in a way that does not rely entirely on any single relationship for its continuity or its authority. That distinction carries enormous weight when thinking seriously about the long-term balance of influence within the palace. The future Catherine is being prepared for everything about the way Catherine's new role has been structured, the extraordinary deliberateness with which it was created and protected, the care with which it has been shielded from public view, and the remarkable level of personal trust it reflects from the king himself, points toward a single unmistakable conclusion that those who have been paying attention have already begun to draw. This is not a short-term arrangement designed to ease a recovering princess back into institutional relevance. It is not a gesture of personal support or a temporary measure intended to fill a gap during a period of transition. It is a preparation, deliberate, long-sighted, and entirely serious. And what Catherine is being prepared for is a future that the palace is working very hard, with great quietness and with remarkable intentionality, to build around her particular and genuinely exceptional qualities. That future is, in the most direct terms available, a monarchy with Catherine at its living and operational heart. Not merely as the eventual queen consort, a role that will come to her naturally and inevitably when William ascends the throne, but as a genuinely formative and shaping figure in how the institution understands its own purpose, presents itself to the world, and sustains its connection with the people it was created to serve across generations. The role she has been given now is, understood in that longer context, a form of serious and structured preparation, not for the ceremonial dimensions of future queenship, which she has been quietly readying herself for since her wedding day in April 2011, but for the substantive, behind-the-scenes, deeply institutional labor that ultimately makes the difference between a monarchy that genuinely endures and one that slowly and irreversibly loses the confidence and the affection of the people who give it meaning. What is particularly striking about this preparation is how clearly it reflects a coherent and specific theory of what the monarchy needs to be in the 21st century if it is to survive and to matter. The old model, in which the crown maintained its authority and its mystique through careful distance, through formal grandeur, and through the deliberate and strategic management of public emotion from behind high walls, is increasingly and perhaps permanently difficult to sustain in a world defined by constant information flow, social media immediacy, and a quality of public scrutiny that no institution, however ancient or powerful, can fully control or manage. Charles understands this with the clarity of a man who has watched the monarchy navigate extraordinary and at times existential turbulence over more than 3 decades. His response to that understanding, reflected most concretely and most revealingly in the role he has built for Catherine, is to lean with deliberate and committed energy into authentic human connection rather than retreat from it into the safety of institutional distance. Catherine is, in almost every meaningful respect, perfectly suited to carry that vision forward and to embody it credibly in the eyes of the public. Her demonstrated ability to communicate genuine warmth, without ever sacrificing the dignity that the institution requires of her, to engage meaningfully with serious and sometimes difficult social issues without appearing to compromise the political neutrality of the crown, and to make the monarchy feel simultaneously aspirational and genuinely accessible to ordinary people across the full range of British life, is a combination of qualities that is authentically and remarkably rare. The palace has always known this at some level of awareness. What is new and what is historically significant is the institutional willingness to build the monarchy's future strategy formally and explicitly around those qualities, rather than simply benefiting from them incidentally. The implications of that decision extend far beyond Catherine herself, and reach into every corner of how the institution will function and present itself in the years and decades ahead. A monarchy increasingly and deliberately built around her particular strengths and deeply human instincts will necessarily and profoundly look different from the one that exists today. It will place greater and more consistent emphasis on emotional intelligence as a form of institutional leadership, on community connection as a source of royal authority, and on the kind of visible and credible commitment to the genuine well-being of ordinary people that Catherine has made her defining contribution to the institution's public life. It will be a monarchy that prioritizes being understood over being merely revered, that consciously chooses proximity and openness over grandeur and mystique, and that earns and maintains its place in national life through continuously demonstrated relevance rather than confidently assumed authority. Catherine did not simply recover from illness and return to royal life as it had previously been. She returned to a fundamentally different position within that life, one carrying greater depth, greater responsibility, greater institutional trust, and greater long-term significance than anything she had previously held. And in the quiet rooms where the monarchy's future is being shaped, her name is no longer simply one voice among several. It is the one the institution is organizing itself around. Catherine's secret role is not simply a palace story. It is a signal about where the monarchy is heading and who will define its character for a generation. She was not merely brought back from illness. She was brought into the very center of power, and that changes everything.